And live from Brussels, Sevilla, and Mumbai, it's ZN Live.
Live.
And today we are very excited to have Antonia Loncar as our guest. She was also appearing on the EU Influencer event, and she has over 14 years of experience as a communicator, working for the European Commission, the UN, Euractiv, NGOs, and of course ZN. And she's been doing very interesting work. And I want to ask you a little bit about the thing that you talked about during the EU influencer event, which is the thing that everybody's asking. With all the changes in social media, what do? You talked about a holistic approach and being the leader. What does that mean?
Yes, thank you very much, Phil. I'm happy to bring forward the discussion that we had during the amazing EU Influencer event. This time, it was in a new format. And let me give a great shout out, Phil, to both you and Irem, who did a great job together with the virtual support that was managed by Jesus. So for all of you who have missed it this past year, make sure to stay tuned for the next year, always in September, and always gives a nice way to do la rentrée here back in Brussels. So yes, so when I said the holistic, I try to be more holistic in my life in general. And that's why I also believe in a holistic approach to communication. Why? Because there is a lot of noise. We've been hearing, and we've just talked also about it just before we connected, how the evolution of the digital tools has been creating a lot of noise and a lot of distractions as well. So what does really holistic means in terms of brand development, identity development for an organization or for a political party? It really means connecting back to what your values are and where your audiences are actually. So it means very often we have this also at ZN, and I'm pretty sure Phil and Jesus will agree. We have clients and they will come to us and they will be like, we saw this organization doing this and this is working marvelous. Let's us do this. And then you start talking with the client, and the more you talk with them and the more you look into it, you are like, but your clients are not there. This is not in line with what you have been doing. Like, you're a company or an association that's been existing for decades. Like, why suddenly going to these new formats? Do you have people in-house that can take this over and bring this further? So to connect also to be the leader, not follow the lead. This is a bit also in line with Zaden's being a one step ahead. And this can mean, I know many things, but for me, this means really connecting to your true values and to your audiences and to your communication objectives in a way that feels really organic. So that's when somebody is visiting your social media, wherever they can find you, that they really can feel that they are in a way represented, that it's harmonized, that there is a certain sometimes a way of staying relevant is actually doing a little bit less, but doing it more consistently through a longer period of time. So that's holistic approach. And of course, this in a way, I always find when you are true to yourself, my yoga teacher would say as well, somehow you become a leader because you live in true values to what you are. And by this, you, in a way, even as an organization, can somehow, you're not worried what other people are doing. You're just worried what you are doing for your audiences and for your users, which in a way makes you a leader. I hope this explains it a bit more.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And basically being able to apply your principles to your own communication for an agency especially is quite a challenge. And, this is something we've been working on a lot. And I think what you're seeing now on our channels with the newsletter and the key stories about the network, highlighting the people like you who are working with us on different projects, as well as some of the trends, is our kind of attempt to do that. And for many years, at early stages, we were not doing that much. And so you feel that you're saying something to people, but you're not necessarily implementing it. Now, coming to your point about a holistic approach, I think there's a component, and you said it very well, that we need to be understanding where the audience is. And, for the moment, I think actually the audience doesn't really know where it wants to go because it's moving between X and LinkedIn and maybe a bit of Mastodon and then somewhere else. And it's because there's a lot of fragmentation. So I think the first thing is to understand that fragmentation is probably going to continue into next year and into the election. And that's why we're beginning to really look at how you can bring together your content through your own channels, website, your email newsletter, things that were kind of popular before social media took over. And I think we're going to go back to that with a kind of redistribution approach that's going to matter quite a bit. Now, we have the fragmentation we talked about, and then we have many other trends. Jesus is obviously very excited about AR and VR, amongst other things. We're all excited about ChatGPT. I've actually been playing with a new version of ChatGPT, which allows you to create a bot. Now, I'm not quite sure how you make that public. I think that's coming because it's actually crashing a lot lately. But I think this is a very interesting trend that is very hard to understand in terms of what's it really going to do, because the hype is so difficult to disentangle from reality that it's really challenging. What do you see as the trends that are coming up next year that you're most excited about?
So I have to say that I follow Jesus on this. I'm very excited about AI. Although Jesus is more advanced in knowledge of it, I cannot even repeat all of the terminology that you use because, for me, and this goes back a little bit to what I said before, holistic approach to comms is really also understanding what the future is bringing and where we are heading next. And AI is there. And so even yesterday, I was listening to an online event. They were discussing about, and we are probably going to tackle it as well, a little bit how the European elections and this artificial intelligence with the political messaging is going to be a huge challenge really at the EU level as well as the national level. But listen, I think we have to embrace it, try to understand it, and see how we can make it work for ourselves. So I haven't really tackled still the latest versions of ChatGPT, but one of the things I've been asking myself and with other colleague communicators is how much do we really understand and can differentiate between that content that's been automatically generated and the one that really has this human value. I would like to praise myself and say that, I think that, I can understand it, but I don't think that's going to be the case for much long. However, I'm also about simplifying and streamlining the processes, which AI can help us move forward, because wherever you are, you still have to produce content, and the quantity of content and the pace, especially for bringing it back here in Brussels where I am to the political context, it's going to be a lot of noise. And I understand that sometimes it requires a quantity of content that a communication person needs a support with, So I understand that ChatGPT can be helpful, but it still has to be guided. However, I also think the new trends and, metaverse events ZN always has events, and we even had a Christmas party half in metaverse last year. So always one step ahead. I would also think that these will continue. These are also the ways for example, politicians and policymakers to come to those places where they cannot actually usually reach. Although you might say, but if they cannot reach, then why should they go to metaverse? Maybe they should go on place. But if you think about it, it's all about delivering that message to a wider audience possible and wider number of citizens possible. So I would say that if I had to shape it in a nutshell, is really I'm listening to where and how we are going to integrate AI into our work as communicators, how the tools will be evolving per se. And really, I'm always about trying to pioneer it and embrace it as soon as possible, because that not always only gives you distinctive mark, but it also allows yourself to get comfortable with it, because we will not be able to avoid it. So let's make it work for us.
I think, if I may there, because actually it's really interesting what you're talking, Antonia, because I think, of course, AI is getting in our everyday life. For example, we have Siri at home that we're using in a regular basis already for some time, but that is looks like it's going to continue evolving more and more, and not only then for your everyday life small task and all, but also, as Phil is saying, working on to produce content, but at the same time, maybe even to be on spaces where you personally cannot be. Then suddenly you can start creating those bots, like you were describing, Phil, that is there. That also Meta was announcing that there are bots that you can give a personality that you can train, and then it could be like your kind of avatar, or the welcoming the welcoming bot that is in the space that you create on the VR space, and is there helping or assisting the people that are visiting your spaces. So for the holistic approach that you were describing before, it could be very useful. So indeed, I agree. I think the AI is something that is going to bring a lot of value, and also when you start combining it with different elements. Consider also that now AI is starting to generate code itself. So it could generate code that can be implemented automatically into itself. So then it can even get itself better by the insertion of code. So something cool.
Until you have AGI and the AI becomes alive, and then suddenly the world changes. But talking about holistic, you mentioned yoga. I just want to say happy Diwali to all our Indian viewers, because it's Diwali in India, so very exciting to say happy Diwali. And I want to come back to one thing about AI, which is there were a lot of announcements again last week, and ChatGPT came up with a new version, and actually Elon Musk came up with his version called Grok. Now, what's interesting is the AI, what ChatGPT did is actually what you talked about, Jesus, is to be able to make code, so you can directly create your own GPT. And I actually tested it by creating a GPT for ZN called Zani, after our AI, and another one for hyperthinking. And so you say, look, talk to me about this topic and help me understand how to make my week more creative based on the hyperthinking principles that you can find online, or tell me about ZN based on the services and all the information you reach from the web. It's really interesting, and I think we're going to be able to create chatbots in a few minutes now. Now, it doesn't mean, and so that's going to be incredibly interesting. Another thing that I was doing this week was, I had a meeting sometime back, long meeting, several hours. I took the meeting discussion, I put it into a Word document. So that's, basically voice to text, very straightforward. Then I took that text and uploaded it to ChatGPT, which can now take a lot more information. So like 20 pages, 30-page document. And then you say, give me a summary with all the insights that were discussed, the actions and the specific questions that were asked. And it did a fantastic job. Now, I think the thing is that some of the things we're going to do with this are actually really simple and not that kind of spectacular, but they're going to have a huge impact. So I'm looking at that, but I think we keep missing the big picture, which is we get excited about like one new app that does some different voice generation of that, and we're missing that it's actually a lot of the work process that are going to change massively. Copilot has been rolled out, so it's going to help us write emails and a bunch of different things. So I think very exciting times for AI. Now, Antonia, I want to come back to you, because within all these changes, we always ask our guests, what do you recommend people who just are starting their career in communication, those young interns, people who are students? What do you tell them they need to focus on to be successful in this incredibly, fast-changing environment?
So that's a great question, Phil. It's funny because sometimes, I like to think of myself still as young. So when you ask me this question, I'm like, that was some time ago. Younger, yes, let's put it like that. I think that first, I think this new generation of interns, and we see that with our amazing hyper learners at ZN, they already they grew up with social media. I still remember when, my parents brought the internet at home, and we had this sound, of dialing in. They don't know what it is. They don't know what is a diskette. I forget what, the save sign. So exactly. Thank you. I could only remember it in Croatian. That's, how far it goes. So basically, I think that they've grew with it, which makes it for them in a way natural extension of the skills they have developed just by being a younger generation that lives in this hyper-connected digital world. Having said that, if you are just starting work in communication, be curious and open-minded and hands-on. Try to do as much as you can. Don't be, don't just by default think, oh, this is not for me. You don't know until you tried. For example, I never thought working in necessarily policy communication as such could be something as interesting as it has been, and it has led me, as you said, Phil, in introduction, through many different hats and many different roles. And I'm happy to bring that knowledge also to ZN and to work with clients that are working in that specific field and area. But that's also simply because back when I was just studying comms, this was like not even necessarily an option, or something like I'm Croatian. Croatia was not a member of the EU. So it was not even something I could conceptually visualize. And I always thought it can be a bit boring, if I'm being honest. But then actually for me, it has been such a challenge to work creatively within the set of frames that I have been giving, and what I say, rethink the box, because it's not really thinking inside the box. I don't like that, but you cannot really sometimes think outside the box. You have to rethink the box per se. Maybe it's not box at all. So be really curious, open-minded, and hands-on. Hard work gets recognized, but you cannot get there without it. And the time itself, and just by working, by years passing by, you will by yourself, the path will start in a way forming in front of you. Again, I'm a bit holistic here, I know, but you will understand that by some roles you are being given, assignments you are being given, you are growing into a specific field, and it might lead you to paths you have not considered. And I know we will talk about it later in recommendations. For me, one of the things that I know what keeps me creative and on my toes. I love art. I love going to museums. I love any type of experimental and modern art, although I'm not an artist or gifted in any way, but it's always something that challenges me. And I like then to bring that approach when I'm working with my clients in a small reality that I know. So yes, once again, I will repeat myself, be curious, open-minded, and hands-on, and great things will come your way. And of course, be smart about it. You use the tools at your disposal. LinkedIn is there. We are now on LinkedIn. Connect to those people whose stories you find interesting. Reach out to them. There is always a moment for quick LinkedIn message or a 15-minute call, and talk and network strategically, and work, and things will just come your way as you progress. That's a bit
very good advice. And I think the difficulty for people today is that what they study is often very different from what they have to do, because they're often studying traditional communication, and it doesn't involve social media strategy, and it might, they talk about it, but they don't really have a different view of things. So I think being adaptable, learning new things, I think these are really the skills that you need, and being very open to the fact that it's not what you thought it would be. And it keeps changing. And I think follow those opportunities that come to you, because they're just highly unpredictable. So now we have time for some recommendations. So let's go to the recommendations. So you have quite a few recommendations from us. So why don't you tell us what you wanted to start for, and you wanted to mention a newsletter that has dropped today, actually. So what is the newsletter you want to talk about?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, actually, I think he was on one of your previous episodes, many episodes ago, Tom Moylan, who I don't know personally, but he has been recommended and referenced to me when I just moved to Brussels 5.5 long rainy years ago. And he has an amazing newsletter that's really focused on communication. It dropped just this morning. He, talks about authenticity. So in his latest edition. I was reading this morning, so it can in a way be also connected to the holistic approach if we want. And then I want to also give a shout out to Euractiv's Tech Brief that's edited by Luca Bertuzzi, who is a great, I don't know if you know him, in Brussels Bubble. He follows all things related to Digital Services and Digital Markets Act, because one of the things that future of digital comms will bring also regulation of this digital comms. So we might as well try to. It's still very. EU is the first organization, first pan national organization that's trying to provide some sort of framework for AI, which I know AI enthusiasts are not enthusiastic themselves about, but it's also much needed to understand and regulate the space they operate within. So follow Lucas and Euractiv's work on this. And then I have a couple of different things that I would like recommend that are a bit, might seem scattered, but I mentioned just in my reply before that for me, I try to be as wide as possible in understanding where the next trends are, but also I come from working in comms and the creative part of comms, writing and creating content. So I'm all about narratives and storylines and brand identities and brands development in a holistic way, which is something that when we bring it really to here to Brussels and to the policy sphere, it's sometimes impacted by what happens at the other part of the Atlantic Ocean in the States. That's why a couple of the podcasts that I've listed are actually podcasts that are produced there. So one of them, which is done by the Stanford Graduate School of Business, it's Think Fast, Talk Smart. And it talks really a lot about the trends in communication in all of its shapes and formats, but also how to be better communicators ourselves and how we can improve using those tools. We also have the USC Annenberg School of Communication, one of the leading school of communications in the world. They have their own podcast as well, also always discussing and bringing those discussions further that are pertinent into trends of communication. And I'm personally a fan of John Favreau. He used to be a speechwriter for President Barack Obama, and he has offline podcasts where he discusses many trends, mostly pertinent to the USA political environment. But, you know, the way US politics is talked about and the narrative it creates, it impacts European politics as well. So it's something we should really be listening to and understanding, because it will trickle down also to the European politics as well, in a different shape and format, absolutely. But we can already notice the change has come in the way also, you know, politicians here in Brussels talk about themselves, and we ourselves talk about the policies. We feel them much closer to ourselves, and we talk about them in a way they impact ourselves, which has not always been the case, as you might well know. And then there are a couple of really, I wanted to put in for all of those that are really curious. So as I mentioned, storyline, I'm a big fan. I write myself still, sometimes now more for passion. And I love always, I believe once I did a training in comms and they told us like every post, even the shortest, has to be like a novel in itself, introduction, plot, and resolution. So I love these podcasts that create like worlds in themselves, and they have such a strong brand narrative that they have been developing for a long time. Like, for example, I love Table Manners. It's a podcast by a singer, Jessie Ware, who I also am a fan of, where she and her mother basically welcome Kylie Minogue, and then they cook together and talk about all of the different things that are happening in the world. For those of you who are French speakers, I would recommend one of the leading podcasts for women in France, which is called La Poutre. Tackles all of the different topics that are really relevant for us as women. I always advocate for those topics as well, more women's stories in public spaces, please. And then I also like Second Life. It's by Hilary Kerr. It's a podcast about how changing professions, and, you know, really, maybe that's something I would recommend to young people at the beginning of their career to listen to, because it really creates a narrative from all of these different people who have been successful in different fields and how they created their own stories and their own career path. And even The Rich is the podcast that's really about gossip, but we all need from time to time to get amused, and I like gossip, so why not to put it also there. And I would also then maybe wrap down by mentioning the books. One is really for me copywriting, I would not say Bible, but one of the leading books, which is called Made to Stick. And it is really some interesting, when you are at the beginning of your copywriting career or content creating career, can find a couple of thoughts of how you can develop interesting content. And lastly, and that's again going back to the storytelling, because I really was so amazed by this great book I read a couple of years ago, but it's really amazing. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that correctly. And her book Americana. She even quoted parts of the book at Beyonce's concert, so I think that tells it itself. But she's a wonderful narrator and manages to really bring you into her world. And there's nothing like it's nothing that I like as I like a good story. So voila, that's a communicator in me, I guess. So thank you for the time.
Well, I think that's great. We have a lot of material, so it's actually being shared heroically by Han behind the scenes, who's putting the different links online so people can check them out. But we will have them in our recap articles so that people can check all these things. And we are great believers in ongoing learning and constantly developing your mind, developing your skills. So for us, it's very important that you're building this into your practice. By the way, Tom Moylan has an organization called Restless Brussels, which is all about improving the city. He's been doing some events, so I strongly recommend people to check him out there as well. I like what you said about the story, which reminds me of the hero's journey, which is, how do you create an arc to every story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and kind of follows the key rules of good writing. So I think that's very interesting. And I think also Made to Stick is very good, very basic kind of communication with what are the words and what are the ways to grab people's attention. So very interesting. Now, Jesus, you are also a big fan of art, of course, and you have a book that's also off topic. So tell us about your book.
True, because actually lately I'm a lot into ancient history. Now that I'm traveling and came to Sevilla and all that for the the EU Space Week, who has been really interesting. So I've been posting something on social media, but in parallel, I have been reading a lot about ancient history and all. And right now, I got a version of Gilgamesh, which is one of the, I think is the first epic poem of the ancient Mesopotamia. That I got a version of it by Stephen Mitchell, which is really nice, because I remember having read it in the past. It was very near to the literal. It was a very literal translation, and it wasn't so good. And this one here, Stephen Mitchell has given it an adaptation towards the English poem and sound. So then it's really cool. I really like it. And also, I suggest it. So that's my suggestion for today.
Excellent. No, I think that's great. And if you're also in India, you should check out the Gita and the different books that explain actually a lot of the festivities, but there are also some of these classic stories. My recommendation actually is something that I think you get very excited about, Jesus, and so do I, which is a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And he's actually the kind of person who codified the OKRs, the objectives and key results, which is a strategic approach pioneered by Andy Groves at Intel, inspired by Peter Drucker, and has become one of the kind of core strategic approaches that people use. And we've been actually using it at ZN to align the organization, develop strategic goals. So a kind of good reminder to think about, how we get to where we want to go and the strategy that goes into it. So that's a lot of reading for everyone and podcasting, listening, etc. So have a fantastic weekend. It's been great to have you, Antonia. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic weekend, and see you online. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.